My name is Hailey Brooks, and to my family, I was never really a daughter, a sister, or even a person worth respecting. To them, I was the servant, the one who cleaned up, the one who ran the errands, the one who had to swallow every insult and pretend it didn't hurt. Haley, bring me another soda. My older sister Victoria barked one Saturday afternoon as if she were royalty on a throne. She didn't even glance up from her phone. Haley, fold the laundry before it wrinkles. You're always so slow. My mother, Evelyn, her voice sharp and full of disapproval. But the worst was when my Uncle Martin leaned back in his chair at a family cookout and smirked at me. This girl isn't a Brooks. She's just the unpaid maid we keep around. The entire family laughed, every single one of them. Even my father, Frank, who should have stood up for me, chuckled like it was the funniest thing in the world. My face burned, but I kept my head down. Because what else could I do? Cry in front of them? No, they fed on my silence. Inside, though, I was screaming. That night, the humiliation was worse than usual. The living room was buzzing with cousins and aunts swapping stories, everyone loud and happy except me. I hovered in the corner, pretending to dust a shelf that didn't need dusting, just so I wouldn't have to sit with them. Victoria spotted me and smirked, her diamond bracelet glittering as she raised her voice. Haley, you missed a spot on the counter earlier, she said. Do you even know how to clean, or should we hire someone better? The room erupted in laughter. Even my cousin Samantha snorted into her drink. My heart thudded against my ribs. Why me? Why always me? I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. My hands shook, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I slipped into the kitchen to catch my breath, clutching the counter until my knuckles turned white. That's when Samantha appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed and her eyes full of that same smug pity she always carried. Poor Haley, she drawled. You'll never be more than this. You should just accept your role. Every family needs someone to do the dirty work. Her words sliced through me like glass. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her I wasn't worthless, that I had dreams, that I wouldn't always be the one they mocked. But my voice locked in my throat. So I smiled faintly and whispered, maybe you're right. Her smirk widened before she sauntered back to the living room. And in that silence, alone with the sound of the dishwasher humming, I made myself a promise. One day I will not be their servant. One day they will bow their heads to me. It wasn't just the insults. It was the way they lived like I didn't exist unless they needed something. I scrubbed their dishes, I vacuumed their floors, I picked up groceries, and still they called me lazy. That night, as I cleared the dinner table, I looked at each of them, my mother sipping her wine with a proud little smile, Victoria laughing at some joke, Uncle Martin whispering something at my expense. And I thought, they think I'm powerless. They think I'll never rise above this, but they have no idea who I really am. And when the time comes, I'll take everything from them. Everything. Later, when the guests left, Victoria cornered me in the hallway, her glossy lips curled into a cruel grin. You should be grateful, Haley, she said. At least you're good for something. If you weren't here to clean up, I don't know what good you'd be to anyone. Grateful for being treated like dirt. I stared at her, my hands raw from scrubbing. I didn't answer. My silence was the only weapon I had left, but inside my voice roared, no, Victoria. One day you'll be the one left useless. One day you'll watch me take everything you thought belongs to you. That night, long after everyone went to bed, I sat by the window in my room. The moonlight fell across my aching hands, the skin red from bleach and soap. I should have been crying like I usually did, but instead, my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Why do they see me this way? Because I never fight back? Because I let them humiliate me? Or is it because deep down they know I'm capable of more, and that terrifies them? I remembered something my grandmother once whispered to me before she passed away. Haley, people will try to make you small so they can feel big. Don't fight their words. Wait, grow in silence. And when you rise so high they'll never reach you. For the first time in years, instead of sobbing myself to sleep, I smiled because I realized something important. Silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. That was the night everything changed. The night I finally saw my family for what they were. Not protectors, not loved ones, but people who thrived on crushing me, but one day I would crush them back, not with fists or screaming matches, but with something sharper, power. success. Revenge so devastating it would leave them gasping. The next morning, as I poured coffee into my father's mug, my mother made her usual cutting remark. Hailey, don't use so much cream. You always waste things. That's why you'll never be able to manage a household. I smiled politely, as if her words didn't sting. But in my head, I whispered, one day, I'll manage more than a household. I'll manage the entire family. And when that day comes, you'll have no choice but to bow to me. That was chapter one of my story. The insults, the mockery, the cruel jokes that cut into me day after day. Scars they thought were proof of weakness. But scars don't just tell a story of pain. Sometimes they are the map that leads you to your destiny. And my destiny, to take everything they owned. People often assume cruelty starts suddenly like a lightning strike. But in my case, it began quietly, almost invisibly, when I was too young to understand what was happening. I was 6 years old when I first noticed that I was different from the rest of my family. Not in looks, not in abilities, but in how they treated me. While other kids at school had mothers who praised their drawings and fathers who carried them on their shoulders, my parents rarely looked at me unless they needed something. Hailey, go fetch my slippers, my dad Frank would order as soon as he came home from work. His voice wasn't gentle, it was clipped, commanding. Hailey, stop making noise and help your sister with her homework, my mom, Evelyn, would say, even though I was the younger one and struggling with my own school assignments. Meanwhile, my older sister, Victoria, was treated like a queen. She got the new toys, the compliments, the hugs. I got the chores. I used to tell myself it was because she was older, but even as a child, I knew the truth to them was a shadow. My earliest memory of real humiliation happened when I was 7. It was Victoria's birthday, and the whole family had gathered in the backyard for her party. Balloons, cake, gifts piled high on the table. It felt like something out of a fairy tale. I stood there, clutching the homemade card I had worked on for hours, glitter glued around the edges, my small handwriting crooked but full of love. I waited for the perfect moment to hand it to her. When I finally did, she looked at it and laughed. What is this? Did you steal paper from school again? You can't even draw right, Hailey. Her friends giggled, and I felt my stomach twist. My mom, instead of defending me, patted Victoria's shoulder. She means well, honey. She's just not very creative. That was it. My 7-year-old heart shattered, and no one noticed. As the years passed, the pattern grew clearer. I wasn't the daughter they boasted about at work parties. That was Victoria. I wasn't the one they bragged about in church, showing off good grades or piano recitals. Again, Victoria, I was the one they gave tasks to. Hailey, take out the trash. Hailey, clean your cousin's shoes. She stepped in mud. But Hailey, run to the corner store and grab milk. No one asked what I wanted, what I dreamed of, or who I hoped to be. When I was 10, I overheard a conversation that explained everything. My parents thought I was asleep, but their voices carried through the thin walls of our house. She's just not like Victoria. My mom sighed. Victoria has presence. She's destined for something big. Hailey, well, Hailey is better suited for simple things. Exactly, my dad agreed. Victoria is our shining star. Hailey's role is to support her. Every family has someone who has to sacrifice. Evelyn, she's just not meant for more. Those words burned into my mind like acid. Not meant for more. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how parents could say that about their own child. From that day on, I stopped asking them for anything. No hugs, no encouragement, no recognition. I knew I wouldn't get it. High school only made things worse. Victoria blossomed into the perfect daughter, the straightest student, the varsity cheerleader, the one teachers adored. Everyone at school knew her name. And me. I was Victoria's little sister. The one who carried her books when she was too busy to bother. The one who did her laundry before big games. The one who quietly typed up her essays when she was too tired from practice. Don't you want to do your own homework? My cousin Samantha once sneered, watching me type furiously at the family computer. I shrugged, forcing a smile. I'll do mine later. But the truth was, by the time I finished Victoria's, I was too exhausted to care about mine. The imbalance grew sharper when money was involved. When Victoria turned 16, my parents surprised her with a brand new car. A shiny blue sedan sat in the driveway, ribbons tied across the hood. She squealed, hugged them, and posed for pictures. When I turned 16, I got a secondhand bicycle. No ribbon, no celebration, just my dad tossing me the keys to the rusty lock. You should be grateful. My mom told me when I tried to hide my disappointment. Not everyone gets something at 16. Besides, you don't need a car. Where would you even go? Her words stung worse than any slap. It wasn't about the car, it was about what it symbolized. Victoria deserved freedom, recognition, mobility. I deserved nothing. By the time I graduated high school, I had stopped expecting anything from them. While Victoria's graduation party was catered with banners and speeches, mine was a quiet dinner at home. I cleared the plates myself while my family laughed about Victoria's college plans. Hailey, you'll stay local, right? My dad asked casually. We can't afford two kids away at college, and besides, you'll be useful helping out here. There it was again. Useful. That was my role. Not brilliant, not cherished. Just useful. I nodded silently, though my chest ached. College life was no different. Victoria went off to a prestigious university on the East Coast, funded fully by my parents. I stayed at the community college nearby, working part-time at a diner to pay for my own books. Every paycheck went to bills, groceries, or whatever my mom demanded. Since you're living here rent-free, she reminded me, I should contribute. I wanted to scream that my contribution was my entire life, but I bit my tongue, as always. But here's the thing, while my family thought they were breaking me, they were actually shaping me. Every insult hardened me. Every troll taught me discipline. Every dismissal fueled a quiet fire inside me. I learned how to endure. I learned how to plan. And most importantly, I learned how to stay silent while building a storm they couldn't see coming. One memory stands out above the rest. I was 21, sitting in the kitchen, exhausted after a double shift. Victoria waltzed in home for the holidays, flaunting her designer clothes and expensive perfume. She looked me up and down, smirking. Still working at that greasy diner. God, Hailey, you'll never amount to anything if you don't aim higher. I wanted to laugh at the irony. She had never worked a day in her life. But instead I nodded and muttered, Me, you're right, as she walked away satisfied, and I sat there, clenching my fists under the table. No, Victoria, I'm not worthless. I'm building something you'll never see coming. That was the backstory of my so-called role in the Brooks family. To them, I was the servant, the background character, the filler in a story where Victoria was the star. But they had no idea. The scars they gave me weren't signs of defeat, they were fuel. And soon, very soon, those scars would turn into the sharpest weapon they'd ever seen. Because I was done being their servant. Cruelty doesn't just sit still. It evolves, it finds new ways to dig into you. By the time I was in my mid-20s, my family's treatment of me had gone from casual dismissals to deliberate humiliation. They no longer saw me as just a servant. They saw me as their personal punching bag, a safe outlet for every bitter thought, every superiority complex they carried. And I let them, because what choice did I have? Or at least that's what I told myself back then. It started small, as it always did. My mother, Evelyn, loved to make comparisons whenever she had company over. Victoria is thriving in her firm, she would say proudly to her bridge club friends. She's already a team leader, you know. Everyone can tell she's destined for success. Then, inevitably, her gaze would flick to me, hovering near the kitchen door. Hailey helps out around the house, she would add with a dismissive shrug, like I was the family pet. Lauder, nods, polite smiles. Inside, I felt like the walls were closing in. My father, Frank, wasn't much better. He had this habit of turning me into the butt of his jokes at dinner parties. Don't ask Hailey to handle the finances. He'd laugh when conversations drifted to money. She can barely balance her own checkbook. The guests chuckled, never realizing that I was the one who actually paid half the household bills on time while he spent money on golf clubs. One night, I dared to correct him. Actually, Dad, his glare shut me down instantly. Don't interrupt adults when they're talking. The table went silent for a moment, then the laughter started again, and I wished I could disappear into the floor. But the worst of it all was Victoria. She had mastered the art of twisting every moment into a performance at my expense. She'd breeze into the house during the holidays, her designer heels clicking against the floor, her perfume filling every room. Hallie, she'd say sweetly, handing me her coat without even looking at me, be a dear and hang this up, will you? And like an obedient shadow, I did it. Every single time. She'd throw parties and insist they be held at our family home because Mum's house is so spacious. Which of course meant I spent the entire night refilling drinks, cleaning up spills, and collecting dirty plates while she basked in the spotlight. At one of those parties, I overheard her whisper to a friend, loud enough for me to catch. Don't mind Hailey, she loves cleaning. It's the only thing she's good at. Her friend giggled. My stomach clenched. By then, even my cousin Samantha had joined in, emboldened by Victoria's lead. At Thanksgiving, as I carried out the turkey, Samantha smirked and said, "Careful, Hailey, don't drop it. If you ruin dinner, what else could you possibly contribute to this family?" The table erupted in laughter. My vision blurred with tears, but I blinked them back. I placed the turkey on the table gently, then slipped away into the kitchen. Alone, I gripped the counter until my knuckles turned white. Why me? Why do they need to break me again and again? Is it because they can't? Because they know I won't fight back? But it wasn't just words anymore. It was money. Whenever bills piled up, my parents turned to me. "You're still living here rent-free," my mom would remind me. "It's only fair you cover the groceries and utilities. Never mind that Victoria made six figures and sent home nothing. Never mind that my dad blew hundreds on golf trips. I paid. I always paid. I remember one month my paycheck barely covered the electricity and groceries. I had nothing left for myself, not even bus fare. I walked 5 miles to work in the rain. My shoes were soaked through, my feet blistered. When I came home that night, exhausted and hungry, Victoria was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up at me, smirking. "Rough day, sis. Maybe if you tried harder, you wouldn't always look so desperate." The word clung to me like poison. Desperate. The breaking point almost came on my 26th birthday. I hadn't expected much, I never did. But part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, they'd at least acknowledge it. A card, a slice of cake, a simple happy birthday. Instead, I came home to find the family gathered in the living room, celebrating Victoria's promotion. Balloons, champagne, laughter. I stood in the doorway clutching the small cupcake I had bought myself from the diner where I worked. No one looked at me. Finally, my mom noticed. "Oh, Hailey, you're home. Be a sweetheart and grab more glasses from the kitchen, will you?" I set the cupcake down on the counter, my appetite gone, and fetched the glasses like an obedient servant. No one remembered it was my birthday. No one cared. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had told myself to be patient, to endure, to let their cruelty pass over me like waves on stone. But stone wears down eventually, and I realized I was done being their stone. Still, the humiliations didn't stop. One evening, Uncle Martin made a show of pulling a $20 bill from his wallet and waving it at me. "Here, Hailey," he said, grinning as the others watched. "For all your hard work tonight. Don't spend it all in one place, da." The room burst into laughter. My face burned as I took the bill with trembling fingers. I wanted to tear it to shreds right there, to scream at him, to throw his cruelty back in his face. But instead, I slipped it into my pocket, my silence louder than any words could have been. Because I knew something they didn't. Their mockery was fuel. Every insult, every jab, every moment they thought they were breaking me, they were actually building me. The final straw came at Christmas. Victoria hosted the holiday at our house again, filling it with her glamorous friends and coworkers. She made a toast in the middle of the night, her glass raised high. "To family," she declared, "especially my wonderful parents, who gave me everything I needed to succeed." She glanced at me then, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. "And to Hailey, for keeping the place clean." A laughter exploded around the room. I froze, my chest tight, my face burning. My hands shook as I held the tray of hors d'oeuvres. Something snapped in me. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I didn't beg them to stop. I just stared at her, my mind already spinning, already calculating, already planning. Enough. Enough of this. You think I'm your servant. You think I'm powerless. Fine. Keep thinking that, because when I finally strike, you won't see it coming. That was the moment, the night my humiliation reached its peak. They thought they had broken me, but what they didn't realize was that they had awakened me, and soon, very soon, the servant they mocked would become their master. The night of that Christmas party, when Victoria raised her glass and reduced me to a maid in front of a room full of strangers, something inside me finally snapped. For years, I had swallowed their words, buried my pain, and convinced myself that silence was survival. But silence had turned me into their doormat, their scapegoat, their personal servant. And if I didn't change something now, this would be my forever. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness of my childhood room. My hands still smelled faintly of bleach and roast turkey. My body ached from bending and serving all day. My mind replayed their laughter over and over, a soundtrack of mockery I couldn't turn off. And in that darkness, I whispered to myself no more. I began watching them differently after that. Not as family, but as opponents. I studied their weaknesses, their blind spots, the things they took for granted. Victoria was arrogant, careless with her finances despite her high-paying job. She lived for appearances, clothes, cars, parties, but rarely paid attention to the boring details like contracts, bills, or documents. My mother, Evelyn, was prideful. Her greatest weakness was the family image. She cared more about what neighbors thought than what her own children felt. Her vanity made her predictable. My father, Frank, had secrets. I knew he gambled. I'd caught glimpses of overdue notices in his desk, heard the hushed phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. He was terrified of being exposed as anything less than the dependable patriarch he pretended to be. And Uncle Martin, his weakness was greed. He was always sniffing around for a deal, a shortcut, a way to make money without lifting a finger. Every one of them had a crack, and I was going to split those cracks wide open. But revenge isn't built overnight. It takes patience, strategy, and timing. So I started small. At work, I took on extra shifts at the diner. I saved every tip, every paycheck, cutting out luxuries until I had a small cushion of cash. Instead of spending my breaks scrolling through my phone, I read books on business, finance, personal growth. I taught myself how money moved, how power worked. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I used the family's old laptop to take online courses. Accounting, digital marketing, real estate basics. I devoured knowledge like a starving person at a feast. And slowly, I began to build something they couldn't see. Of course, the family kept treating me the same. Hailey, take the trash out. Hailey, iron Victoria's dress for her party. Hailey, you should be grateful we let you live here rent-free. I obeyed, outwardly unchanged. I smiled, nodded, and carried on. But inside, I was a volcano, quiet on the surface, molten fire below. Every insult was fuel. Every chore was training. Every laugh at my expense was one more reason to make my revenge devastating. One night, about 3 months after that Christmas party, I overheard a conversation that accelerated everything. Victoria was in the kitchen with Mom, her voice carrying easily into the hallway. I've been racking up credit card debt. But it doesn't matter, she said casually. Hailey will still be here to clean up if I ever fall. She always is. They laughed together. That was when I realized they didn't just see me as less. They saw me as disposable, a safety net, a servant they could lean on forever. And I thought, what if the safety net wasn't there anymore? What if instead it rose up and strangled them? I began setting my plan into motion. First, I worked in silence. I took on a second job, temp office work downtown, filing, data entry, basic stuff, boring to most, but to me it was gold. I learned how corporate systems worked. I learned about paperwork, contracts, loopholes. Then I networked quietly, customers at the diner, coworkers at the temp job. I listened, I asked questions, I built connections. No one in my family noticed because they never asked where I went or what I did. And all the while, I was saving, planning, waiting. But revenge isn't just about building yourself. It's about setting traps. So I planted seeds in their world too. I started keeping copies of things, letters, overdue bills, bank states I accidentally found while tidying up. I saved them in a secret folder under my bed, each piece of paper weapon waiting for the right moment. I knew my father's gambling could ruin him if exposed. I knew my mother's obsession with reputation would collapse if the neighborhood learned the truth about how she treated me. I knew Victoria's arrogance with money would catch up to her if the right people saw the numbers. And Uncle Mart, let's just say I'd overheard enough shady conversations to know he wasn't paying all his taxes. Each of them had built their lives on a shaky foundation. All I had to do was push. One evening, as I walked home from work, I stopped in front of the house and looked at it differently. The Brooks family home wasn't a sanctuary. It was a fortress of their pride. They thought it was impenetrable, but every fortress can be conquered. That night, I stood by my window and whispered to myself, When I'm done, this house will be mine. It wasn't easy to live a double life. By day, I was the obedient Hailey, the girl who scrubbed dishes, folded laundry, ran errands. By night, I was someone else entirely. A woman learning, building, sharpening. Sometimes I thought the pressure would crush me. But then I'd hear one of their voices again. Hailey, you'll never amount to anything. Hailey, you're lucky we let you stay here. Hailey, you're nothing without us. And I would smile to myself because I knew a truth they didn't. I was everything despite them. The true turning point came when I received a call from a customer at the diner, and she was a real estate agent, and she remembered how attentive I had been. You've got a good head for details, she told me. If you ever want to learn about property, call me. I did. Within 6 months, I had a part-time position as her assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it opened my eyes to a new world: contracts, negotiations, property values. A world my family never imagined I was capable of entering. That was when I knew real estate would be my weapon, because while they laughed at me for scrubbing floors, I would buy the very ground they stood on. Every night, I whispered my vow louder. No more silence. No more humiliation, no more servitude. They had mocked me into invisibility. But soon my revenge would make me unforgettable. That was chapter 4, the turning point where Hailey stopped being a servant and started becoming a strategist. The plan was forming, the weapons were gathered, and the servant they laughed at was ready to rise. The revenge, I learned, is not loud. It doesn't come in fiery confrontations or shouting matches across the dinner table. Real revenge is quiet, methodical, and patient. It's a chess game, and my family had no idea they'd been playing against me for years. The pieces were finally in place. The first move was against Victoria. Victoria, my golden sister, the family's pride, had been living far beyond her means. The car, the clothes, the parties, none of it was fully paid for. I had seen the overdue notices in the trash, the ignored calls flashing across her phone, but she always believed she was untouchable. Through my job with the real estate agent, I learned about property auctions. One evening, while filing paperwork, I saw a familiar name: Victoria Brooks. She had taken out a risky mortgage on a condo in the city, and she was behind on payments. I smiled to myself. The timing couldn't have been better. When the bank moved to foreclose, I was ready. I had saved enough, built my credit quietly, and with my mentor's guidance, I placed a bid at the auction. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of Victoria's gleaming condo, holding the deed with my name on it. She didn't know yet. The reveal came a month later. Victoria invited friends over for one of her infamous parties. I showed up quietly, dressed neatly, not as a servant, but as someone who belonged. Hailey, she sneered when she saw me. Don't just stand there, help with the coats. I smiled sweetly and said, actually, I don't work here. I own here. Her laughter was instant. Sharp? What are you talking about? I pulled the folded papers from my bag and placed them on the counter. This condo isn't yours anymore. It's mine. Bought it legally, fair and square. Her face drained of color. She grabbed the papers, scanning them with trembling hands. Her friends leaned in, whispering. You're lying, she shouted. Am I? I tilted my head. Go ahead, your bank. The silence that followed was delicious. Her friends excused themselves, uncomfortable, leaving Victoria standing in her once perfect condo, stripped of her pride. I walked out that night, leaving her to crumble. The second move was against Frank, my father. He thought his gambling was his secret. He thought his late nights at the office fooled everyone. But I had the receipts. I had quietly collected notices, photographed bills, documented every shred of evidence. With the right timing, I exposed it, not to him, but to his employer. I mailed an anonymous package filled with copies of his overdue gambling debts directly to the company board. Within a month, whispers circulated about Frank Brooks. Unreliable, irresponsible. Can't be trusted with finances. He was quietly let go. When he came home with a forced smile, pretending he had retired early, I sat at the dinner table, sipping my tea. Wife day. Dad, I asked softly. He glared at me, but I saw the fear in his eyes. For the first time, he looked small. The third strike was against Evelyn, my mother. Her entire world revolved around appearances. Church groups, neighborhood gossip, the idea that she had raised the perfect family. But perfection is fragile, and I knew exactly where to strike. I arranged for certain truths to slip out at the worst possible moments. A misplaced envelope on the pastor's desk containing details of Victoria's foreclosure, an anonymous tip to the neighborhood association about Frank's gambling scandal, a casual mention at her bridge club that maybe the Brooks family wasn't as perfect as it seemed. It spread like wildfire. The next time I saw her at church, she wore sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. Her friends whispered behind her back. Poor Evelyn, they said. I thought she had it all together. She avoided my gaze, but I could feel the crack in her pride. Finally, there was Uncle Martin. Greedy, careless Martin. I had overheard enough of his shady business deals to know he wasn't exactly paying his taxes properly. I made an anonymous call to the IRS, providing just enough detail to spark an audit. When the letters started arriving, he went pale. When the agents came knocking, he went silent. And when his accounts were frozen, he stopped showing up to family gatherings altogether. Piece by piece, they fell. Victoria lost her condo, forced to move back in with my parents. Frank lost his job and his reputation. Evelyn lost her social standing. Martin lost his money. And me, I gained everything. The true climax came one spring evening, when the entire family gathered at the Brooks house to discuss the future. I arrived late, dressed not in my usual faded jeans and sweater, but in a sharp navy blazer. I walked in calmly, holding a folder of documents. What's this about? I asked, as if I didn't already know. They were arguing, shouting, really. Victoria blaming Frank, Frank blaming Martin, Evelyn crying that her friends had abandoned her. When they saw me, the room fell quiet. Hailey, my mother said, her voice hoarse. So where we need your help. The words were like music. My help, I repeated. Yes, my father said reluctantly. You've been saving money, haven't you? You're good with details. Maybe you can fix some of this mess. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to taste the desperation. Finally, I smiled and opened my folder. Inside were deeds, contracts, and bank statements all in my name. You're right, I said softly. I am good with details, which is why everything you thought you owned now belongs to me. I laid the papers on the table one by one of Victoria's condo. The family's second mortgage, quietly bought out under my name. Uncle Martin's forfeited property I had acquired at auction. Their faces paled with every page. This is impossible, Victoria stammered. Oh, it's very possible, I said, my voice steady. While you laughed at me, while you mocked me, I was building. And now I own more than any of you. But the silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I stood then, gathering my folder. I'm not your servant anymore, I told them. I never was. But you made me strong, you made me patient, and you made me dangerous. I walked out of that house with my head held high, their stunned faces burned into my memory. For the first time in my life, they weren't laughing, and they never would again. When I walked out of that house, folder tucked under my arm, the cool spring air hit my face like freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one carrying their burdens. I wasn't their errand girl, their servant, their scapegoat. I was the one in control. But revenge doesn't end in a single night. It ripples, it spreads, it reshapes everything in its path. And I watched almost like an outsider as those ripples swallowed my family whole. Victoria was the first to fall completely. After losing her condo, she tried to claw her way back into her old life. She applied for loans, begged friends for money, even tried to use my parents as guarantors. But her reputation had already crumbled. Word spread quickly in her circles. Victoria Brooks is reckless with money, a liability. And the invitations stopped coming. The friends stopped calling. I'll never forget the day I saw her at the grocery store, her hair messy, her cart filled with instant noodles instead of the imported delicacies she once flaunted. She avoided my eyes, but I didn't avoid hers. Rough week, I asked softly, echoing the smug tone she had once used on me. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She just wheeled her cart away, defeated. For once, she understood what it felt like to be invisible. Frank, my father, spiraled after losing his job. The man who once mocked me as too stupid to handle money was suddenly faced with bills he couldn't pay. Without his steady paycheck, the debts he'd hidden for years came crashing down. Collectors called day and night. Letters piled on the counter. The proud patriarch who once strutted through the neighborhood in pressed suits now shuffled around in sweatpants, unshaven and hollow-eyed. I didn't laugh at him. I didn't need to. The silence of his downfall was louder than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. Evelyn, my mother, suffered the cruelest fate of all, the loss of her reputation. The woman who once held her head high in church, who lived for the admiration of neighbors, now walked with her eyes downcast. Whispers followed her everywhere. Did you hear? Her perfect daughter lost her condo. Her husband gambled away everything. And poor Hailey, well, maybe she wasn't the problem after all. I saw her shrink under the weight of gossip. The pride that once made her powerful now made her crumble. And Uncle Martin, he disappeared. The IRS investigation gutted him. He sold off his cars, his lake house, even his prized boat. He avoided family gatherings altogether, too ashamed or too broke to show his face. The man who once waved $20 bills at me as if I were a beggar now had nothing to wave at anyone. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. My family, once so loud, so smug, so full of laughter at my expense, grew quiet. Meals were eaten in silence. Parties stopped altogether. The Brooks house, once a stage for their cruelty, became a tomb of regret. And I kept building. With the properties I had acquired, with the money I had saved, I launched something of my own. A small business, then another. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just steady growth, brick by brick, my foundation. The same way they had once underestimated me, the world did too. And just like before, I let them, because silence had always been my greatest weapon. One evening, months later, I visited the Brooks house, not as their servant daughter, but as something else entirely. When I walked in, they were all there. Victoria on the couch, Mom in her armchair, Dad staring blankly at the TV. Their faces looked older, more tired. No one laughed when I entered. No one smirked. Hailey, my mother said quietly, her voice almost trembling. We need your help. I looked at her, at all of them, and felt the strangest mixture of pity and triumph. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, of them on their knees, begging. But standing there, I realized something. I didn't need their apologies anymore. Their downfall was enough. I already helped, I said calmly. I helped by showing you what it feels like to be powerless. They said nothing. They just stared at me, broken. That night, back in my own apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights flickered below, alive with possibility. For so long, my life had been defined by them, by their insults, their mockery, their cruelty. But now, for the first time, my life was mine. I thought about my grandmother's words again. When you rise, rise so high they can never pull you down again. And then I realized I had risen higher than they ever imagined. Do I forgive them? No, some wounds are too deep for forgiveness. But do I carry them with me? Also, no. Their laughter, their insults, their cruelty, they no longer matter, because in the end I proved them wrong. I wasn't the servant, I wasn't the burden. I wasn't the nothing they tried to make me believe I was. I was the storm they never saw coming. And now I was free. That was the aftermath of my revenge, not fireworks, not screaming confrontations, just quiet justice. The servant they mocked became the master, and the family that laughed at me, they would never laugh again.